Hey guys, it's Sagar, and today I am bringing in the video that you all have been waiting for. A detailed camera review of the Redmi Note 10 Pro. The camera module on this Redmi Note 10 Pro looks exactly like the one on the Note 10 Pro Max. The only change is it has a 64 megapixel primary camera as opposed to the 108 megapixel one on the Redmi Note 10 Pro Max. And other than the silver ring around the main camera on the Redmi Note 10 Pro Max, camera modules on both of them look exactly the same. Since the only difference between this and the Note 10 Pro Max is the main camera, many people wanted to know if the 64 megapixel camera is any good or should they spend the extra money and get the Max. So in this video, we are going to take a look at close to 100 image and video samples from all the cameras on this Note 10 Pro and see if they are any good. Now we are going to take a look at some of the camera specs and a few key features that were added to the camera app on this phone. If you want to skip over this part, you can head straight to the image and video samples from the chapters in the timeline of this video. Primary camera gets a 64 megapixel Samsung GW3 sensor with f1.9 aperture and 26mm lens. Next camera gets an 8 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture and 118° ultra wide field of view. Then there is a 5 megapixel camera with f2.4 aperture and a super macro lens. And finally, there is a 2 megapixel sensor again with f2.4 aperture, and this is used for sensing depth information for portrait shots. With the primary camera, you can shoot 4K unstabilized videos at up to 30 fps, 1080p videos at 30, 60 and 120 fps, and 720p videos at 30, 120, 240 and 960 fps. 1080p 30 fps videos get electronic stabilization. At the front, we get a 16 megapixel camera with f2.45 aperture. It can take 1080p videos at 30 fps and 720p videos at 30 and 120 fps. I found the interface of the camera app to be a bit confusing. I mean, like on most other phones, you can swipe to the left or right to switch between various modes. But if you want to take a 64 megapixel image or a slow motion video or use the new clone option, you have to now slide to the mode menu and then select the desired mode. I found it much easier to use these modes when they were laid out at the bottom and we were just a swipe or two away from them. Now because they are hidden away, many people will just forget to use them. This is how the camera app is set out of the box. But fortunately, you can edit the layout from the camera settings and add the modes that you use the most to the featured swiping list. I think you should take some time to set this up according to your preference. You might want to add the new clone or dual video mode to your featured list, just so you are reminded that they are there if you ever need to use them. This is how I like my camera modes to be laid out, especially when I am taking images for camera reviews and comparisons. What you can't add to the featured list is the new super macro mode. There is a dedicated camera for this, but this mode is hidden in the secondary menu. I had someone ask me in the comments that they got this phone on the launch day and their unit doesn't have the super macro mode. Then I had to guide them to where this mode is hidden in the camera app. I think a feature this important should be laid out in plain sight. Pro mode on this phone lets you dial in all the settings according to your liking for shooting videos, just as you could do with images before. Range for the shutter speed in Pro mode is from 1/4000th of a second all the way up to 30 seconds. And the range for ISO is from 50 to 6400. Now before we move to the image and video samples, if you are new to this channel, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. That way, YouTube will make sure you are notified when a new video goes live on this channel. Normally, I start with daytime images, but for this video, let us change things a bit and start with videos first. 4K 30 fps is the maximum resolution that you can shoot in. There is no electronic stabilization at this resolution. But if you still want to take 4K videos, after you have shot them, open them in the Google Photos app, hit the edit button and stabilize them from there. If you want stabilized videos out of the camera, you will have to lower the resolution down to 1080p and shoot at 30 fps. You will lose out on some of the sharpness and details, but look at how much better the overall handheld video looks. You can't take 4K videos with the wide lens. This lens can only shoot 720 and 1080p videos at 30 fps. If you are shooting them in well-lit situations, the videos from this phone can look really good. There is an option to shoot dual videos with this phone. What this means is it can simultaneously capture videos with the front and the rear cameras. While doing so, you can see a few stutters or dropped frames in the videos from the rear camera. Coming to the images, let us start with the ones that I took in daytime. These 16 megapixel pixel binned images from the main camera look really good. There seem to be good amount of details in these daytime shots. I just think there is a bit extra contrast in all of these shots. It makes the shadows appear a bit darker than they need to, making the overall image look a bit contrasty. Now it wasn't exactly sunny when I took these images. It was one of those slightly overcast days, but even then, I think these images should have appeared a bit brighter. Here is one of the images straight out of the camera, and here is the same image with a bit of editing. I think the image processing on this phone needs a bit of tweaking so that these images show a bit less contrast. In most lighting conditions, the Note 10 Pro manages to capture pleasing looking colors which are very close to how the actual scene looked. They are not overly saturated, but there is a nice warm look to these images which I really like. If you like extra punch in your colors, you can use the Pro Color mode, which adds in a lot more saturation and vibrance to the colors in your shot. In some of the shots, like in this one that we saw before, there is a slight green tint. This is how the colors are supposed to look. I have adjusted the white balance on this shot to make it look natural, but this is how the camera captured it. I don't think it's a major issue, and it can easily be fixed with a software update. Here is the same shot with the HDR off and on. While shot with the HDR turned on did manage the bright sun slightly better, it did not do too much to the shadows. If anything, it made them even darker. Now this kind of shot looks great with the HDR mode turned on, because again, it managed the highlights really well. But in shots like these, again, it doesn't do very well with the shadows. It just didn't bring out enough details in them. I really hope Redmi fixes this and improves the dynamic range on this phone. I mean, these images are not really bad, but over the years, we have come to expect more out of Redmi cameras, especially from the Note Pro series phones. If you bring up the shadows and edit these images yourself, they can look really good. Now, all of these have been 16 megapixel pixel bin images from the main camera. But if you want to capture even more details and if you are in well-lit areas, you can switch to the 64 megapixel mode. Here is how these images look side by side. From this far, you might not be able to notice any difference between them, but once you zoom in, you can see that the 64 megapixel ones have much more details in them. You can use this mode when you are trying to capture a landscape or some architecture with a lot of details in them. These 64 megapixel images have more details, but you will have to zoom in 4 to 5 times to even notice a difference between them. These high resolution images don't show a very good dynamic range, and they are also huge in terms of file size. And if you are taking these images in less than ideal light, they also show a lot of noise. So for most of your shots, I think it is best to stick to the default 16 megapixel mode. Now this is how much of the scene the main camera lets you capture. And here is how much more of the scene the wide lens will let you get in the shot. It gives you a whole different perspective of the scene. This camera doesn't capture as many details as the primary camera, and you can see a fair bit of distortion towards the edges. It is also not as good at handling the high dynamic range as the main camera, and there is fairly more noise in these wide shots. If there is plenty of light, images from this camera can turn out really good. There is a 2x option in the viewfinder, but there is no telephoto lens on this camera. So all this button does is zoom in on the image from the main camera, so I don't use it a lot. Coming to the close-up shots, I really like how they turn out. The main camera is fast and accurate at setting the focus on any particular object. Look at how amazing these shots turned out. They are in sharp focus, and thanks to the big sensor and wide aperture, the background is very nicely blurred out. These are normal close-up shots and not portrait ones, so the blur to the background is all optical. I love walking up to things and taking their close-up shots, and being able to do this without the phone continuously hunting for focus saves me a lot of time. Now with the main camera, this is how close you can get to the subject and still be able to set the focus. If you move any closer, the main camera won't be able to set focus on that object. If you want to get even closer to your subject, you will have to switch to the new super macro lens, and it will let you take shots like this. Note 10 Pro gets a 5 megapixel super macro camera, which can take much better images than the 2 megapixel macro camera on many of the other phones. And just look at how close it lets you get to the subject. It is still struggling a bit when you try to take these shots indoors, but given ample light, we can take very good macro shots with this camera. I don't know how useful this mode is going to be for you, but I had a lot of fun trying to take all these super macro shots for this video. If you are a long-time follower of the channel, you know that the portrait mode on any smartphone excites me the most, because more than half of the images that I take are portrait shots. Over time, Redmi phones have got really good at taking these portrait shots. Thanks to the depth sensor, it does an excellent job of detecting the edges of your subject and separating them from rest of the background. It is in no way perfect and misses out in blurring some parts of your hair or glasses at times, but for the most part, these portrait shots look really good. However, this mode doesn't handle the exposure all that well. If you have a lot of bright areas in these portrait shots, they will be blown out. Redmi just needs to work a bit on getting the dynamic range right in all of the modes on this phone. Other than that, portrait shots from this phone look really good. Portraits of objects turn out equally nice. Edges are detected and separated very well from the background, and the blur roll-off also looks very natural. While taking all these portrait shots, this phone also does very well to keep the white balance in check and all the colors looking natural. If you have never tried this before, do it the next time you are clicking images. Unless you are taking images of landscape or some architecture, switch to the portrait mode and look how much better your images turn out. As the light goes down, so does the quality of images from most of the mid-budget smartphones. Let us see if that is the case with the main camera on this Redmi Note 10 Pro. Here are some of the indoor shots in artificial lighting conditions. Images look really good when there is plenty of ambient light around. As the light is reduced, you can see that the images still look good and detailed, but there is a lot of artificial sharpening being added to these shots. It doesn't look very bad, but it changes the look of the entire image a bit, and some people might not like that. Other than that, the images captured in artificial light look good, and most users are going to enjoy clicking images with it. You can also take wide images in these lighting conditions, but as you can see, the camera isn't as good as the primary one, so there is a lot of noise and less details in these artificial or low light wide shots. As we move to lower light, there is more and more noise being introduced in the shot. In most cases, you will have to zoom in to see this, and without zooming in, the overall image is still usable. You can turn on the night mode in these situations, and you can see it does brighten up the images a bit. This mode captures light for a longer time, making the images look brighter. As I zoom in, you can see these night mode shots also appear to be a bit detailed compared to the normal ones. So whenever you feel that you are in a situation when you feel there isn't enough light to take a decent image, switch to the night mode. It will make your images appear brighter and in most cases more detailed. It's also good to know that these night mode images don't take too long to capture. Now you just press the shutter button and within 1 to 2 seconds the image is captured. Now in some of the very low light shots, night mode might make the overall shot look brighter, but because there is barely any light around, it wasn't able to capture any more details. You can see this when I zoom in. Due to this reason, I don't suggest taking images in very low light. The wide lens doesn't get night mode and its images just don't look good in very low light. So again, I don't suggest using it in these lighting conditions. Well, those were all the low light shots that I had for you guys. So now let us move on to the front facing camera. The 16 megapixel front facing camera can take sharp and detailed selfies. Overall colors and skin tones are looking really good and you can see how sharp everything looks. It's not the best looking selfie camera out there, but I still think most people will be happy with the normal selfies that they take in bright light. Edge detection is very accurate for the portrait selfies. Since everything in the background is blurred out, the faces in the portrait selfies look even sharper. It doesn't have any problem detecting and separating multiple faces from the background, so you can take portrait selfies with your friends as well. Again, the colors, skin tones and overall white balance of these portrait selfies appear to be very natural. So overall, I am very happy with the performance of this front facing camera. Here's a video from the front facing camera of the Redmi Note 10 Pro. You can see how it handles the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I am walking around with it. You can also let me know in the comments how do you think it is handling my audio. So after looking at over 100 image and video samples, I think the cameras on the Redmi Note 10 Pro are very good for its price range. As you saw, it can take really good images in almost all lighting conditions. I feel with software updates, if Redmi can fix a few issues that I mentioned, like the extra contrast, improving the dynamic range and the slight green tint that I encountered in some of the shots, cameras on this phone will deliver much better looking images consistently. So the answer to the question that if the cameras on the Redmi Note 10 Pro are any good is a big yes. It has got a really good set of cameras for the price at which it comes in. If camera is your main concern, I don't think you need to spend the extra 3000 rupees and get the Note 10 Pro Max. This phone can take just as good images if not better. I will have to compare it with few other phones in the similar price range to see where it stands against them. But on its own, this Note 10 Pro has got a very good set of cameras. If you guys want to see me compare its cameras with other phones, make sure you have turned on the notifications for the channel. So after looking at all these image and video samples, what do you guys think about the cameras on this phone? Let me know in the comments. I'm also trying to get my hands on the Note 10 Pro Max and see how big of a difference there is between their main cameras. If you guys are interested in watching that video, let me know by hitting that like button. And if you're looking to purchase it, I will really appreciate if you get it from the affiliate links in the description section. That is it for this very detailed camera review of the Note 10 Pro. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.